It was a Tuesday. That's what I keep coming back to. Not a dramatic night, not a special occasion, not even a Friday when you can blame the week wearing you down and your guard being low. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early October, the kind of day that smells like coffee and dry leaves and nothing in particular. We were in the break room at the nonprofit where I worked. I was eating a sandwich I hadn't tasted. She was refilling her water bottle at the sink, and she said something. I don't even remember what she said, some small joke about the coffee machine being broken again. And I laughed. And then I kept laughing. Not because it was that funny. It wasn't that funny. But the way she said it. The way her voice dropped at the end of the sentence, dry and warm at the same time. Like she'd said it specifically for me, even though there were 3 other people in the room. I laughed for 1 second too long. She turned around and caught me still smiling, and something in her eyes shifted. Not much, just a flicker. Just a fraction of a second of something I couldn't name. And then she looked back at her water bottle, and I looked back at my sandwich, and neither of us said anything. And I thought, that was nothing. I told myself that for a long time. Her name was Celeste. She had been working at the nonprofit for 3 years before I arrived. She ran development, grants, donor relations, the kind of work that requires you to believe in something deeply enough to convince other people to fund it. I came in as the new communications director, which meant we were supposed to be partners. Our work lived in the same space. We shared a Google Drive folder. We were in every strategy meeting together. We emailed each other about things that could have been texts, and texted each other about things that could have waited until Monday. That part happened fast. The closeness. I remember being surprised by how quickly I started to think of her as mine. Not in the way you think of a partner, just in the way you think of someone who belongs to your life in a way that feels necessary. Like my morning coffee. Like my route to work. She was just part of how the day was supposed to go. She was funny in a way that snuck up on you. Not loud, not the person in the room performing humor for an audience. More like she observed things very precisely, and then said the most accurate possible thing about them, and the accuracy was the joke. I started waiting for those moments. I started paying attention to what I said, trying to set things up so she'd have somewhere to land. She wore her hair in the same way every day, pulled back loosely, like she'd done it in the car. And by November, I had noticed this so many times that it had become one of those details that anchors a person. Something that means I know you now. Something that would be strange to see any other way. We had lunch together most Fridays. Not always planned. One of us would stand up and say, "I'm going to grab something," and the other one would reach for their jacket, and that was the whole conversation. We went to the same Vietnamese place on 5th Street. And we always ordered the same things, and we talked about work, and about the city, and about the books she was reading, which she talked about like they were people she had spent meaningful time with, and I liked listening to her so much that I would sometimes ask follow-up questions I already knew the answers to, just to keep her going. Her life had a weight to it that I respected. She'd grown up in a part of the country where doing this kind of work, advocacy, community organizing, living on a nonprofit salary in a city that cost too much, was not the path that was laid out for her. Her grandmother still called it her volunteer job. Her mother had come around over time, mostly. There were things she carried that she didn't talk about directly, but that I could feel in the pauses before she answered certain questions. I understood that weight. I had my own version of it. My family was comfortable. Not wealthy. Not the kind of wealthy that comes with a zip code people recognize, but stable, careful. The kind of comfortable that comes with an unspoken agreement about what success looks like. I had spent my 20s navigating the distance between the life they'd mapped for me and the one I was actually building, and by the time I met Celeste, I thought I had made peace with that distance. I thought I had figured out how to hold both. I had not figured it out. But I didn't know that yet. What I knew in those early months was that she made the work feel meaningful in a way it hadn't before she got there. That the days when she worked from home were quieter in a way that wasn't just about sound. That I had started measuring weeks by whether or not I'd had a real conversation with her. I told myself this was friendship. I told myself that with such conviction that for a long time I almost believed it. The first time I noticed it, really noticed it, not the Tuesday with the laugh, but the first time I couldn't rationalize my way back to solid ground, was in December. We were at a donor event, the kind of event where you stand in a room that is too warm and too loud, and you make the same 6 small talk gestures over and over until your face aches from it. Celeste was in her element at these things, which had surprised me at first. She was quiet at the office, but she knew how to move through a room like this. Purposeful, warm, remembering names, asking the right questions. I watched her work and thought, this is how she believes in something. You can see it. It comes out when it counts. I was standing near the drink table, buying myself a moment, when she crossed the room and appeared beside me without announcement. "How are you holding up?" she said, low, just for me. And I said I was fine. And she looked at me for a second like she was deciding something. And then she said, "You've been smiling in that specific way for 45 minutes, the one where your eyes don't move." I stared at her. "I have?" I said. "You do it when you're trying," she said. And then she picked up a glass of water from the table and turned back to the room, and the conversation was over. Just like that. I stood there thinking about the fact that she had been watching me closely enough to identify a specific expression I didn't know I made. I stood there thinking about the fact that she had named it with such tenderness. I went home that night and I tried to read and I couldn't. I tried to sleep and I couldn't. I lay in the dark and I thought about her watching me from across the room, categorizing me, caring enough to notice the difference between my real smile and my performing smile. And I thought about how it felt when she appeared beside me, the warmth that moved through my chest so fast it almost scared me. And I told myself, "You're just tired. You're just grateful to have someone who pays attention. That's all this is." I was so certain. The second time I couldn't rationalize was in January. We had been working late on a grant report, just the two of us, the office empty and cold and lit by the overhead fluorescents that made everything look slightly wrong. She had taken off her shoes at some point and was sitting cross-legged in her chair, reading through a draft. And I was at my desk pretending to edit something on my screen, but actually, I was watching her read. The way she read was particular. Her lips moved a little. Not much, just barely. Just enough to know she was absorbing every word, and her pen moved in small circles in the margins, and occasionally she would exhale through her nose in this specific way that meant she'd found something that needed fixing. I watched all of this, and I felt something I didn't know what to call. Not attraction. Or I told myself it wasn't attraction. Not specifically. Not the kind you name. More like recognition. Like seeing a painting for the 10th time and suddenly understanding what you've been looking at. She looked up and caught me watching. "What?" she said. "Nothing," I said. "Just tired." She held my eyes for a second. That pause she had. That way of making a moment last one beat longer than it needed to. And then she said quietly, "We should probably finish this," and went back to the draft. My heart was doing something I chose not to examine. By February, I had stopped being able to pretend the problem was tiredness. She had started texting me outside of work. Nothing significant. A link to an article she thought I'd like. A photo of a dog she'd seen on her walk. A question about a book I'd mentioned. Normal things. Friend things. I answered every single one immediately, which I noticed. And then I noticed that I was waiting for them, which I also noticed. And then I noticed that when a whole day went by without hearing from her, I felt the absence like a small hole in the middle of my chest, and that I could not pretend not to notice. But I also could not say the thing that was underneath all of this. Because there was something else. Something that sat on top of all of it like a paperweight. Celeste's life was constructed very differently from mine. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was in transition, which meant it was still cheap, but not for long. She drove a car that had 140,000 miles on it and smelled like pine air freshener and old coffee. She was methodical about her budget in the way that people are when they have grown up understanding that security is not a given. She took the work personally because it was personal, because the communities we were trying to serve were communities she knew, that she came from, that her grandmother still lived in. I owned my apartment. I had a financial cushion that I didn't talk about, because I didn't know how to talk about it, in a room full of people who were working for what they believed in, and making sacrifices I was not making. My family helped me when I let them, which was not often, and which I felt guilty about even when it made sense. I had not thought of this as a wall between us. I had not thought of it as anything at all. Until the night in February when her car broke down on the way home from a work event, and I was the person she called, and I picked her up, and we sat in a parking lot for 45 minutes waiting for the tow truck. And at some point she said, very quietly, almost to herself, "I just don't know how people do it. I don't know how people keep doing all of this and still have anything left." And I reached over and put my hand over hers on the center console, just for a second, and I felt her fingers turn under mine, not pulling away, just turning, like she was accepting the weight of my hand. And neither of us said anything. When the tow truck came, I took my hand back. But I thought about it all the way home. I thought about how her hand had felt. How warm. How she hadn't moved away. And I thought about the distance that existed between her life and mine. And I thought, even if this were something, it couldn't be anything. I thought that, and I kept thinking it. And I thought maybe if I thought it long enough, it would stop being complicated. March arrived, and everything was a little worse, and also a little better, the way things are when you're in the middle of something you haven't named yet. Better. We were closer. Whatever had been quietly building between us had settled into something that felt easy from the outside. Inside jokes, shorthand, the kind of fluency you develop with someone when you've spent enough hours in the same room caring about the same things. She would finish my sentences in meetings and I would fill in her pauses, and our colleagues had started to treat us as a unit, which was efficient for the work and confusing for me in ways I kept trying to redirect. Worse, I had started to understand what I was carrying. It wasn't ambiguous anymore. Not really. I could still tell myself it was ambiguous. I was very good at this. I had been practicing for months. But somewhere in February, in a parking lot, with her hand turned under mine, the ambiguity had started leaking, and by March it was gone. What I felt was very clear. I just couldn't afford what it would cost. Not literally. Not entirely literally. But there was a sentence that lived in the back of my head that I couldn't get rid of. She deserves someone who understands her life. Someone who woke up every morning for 30 years, knowing that comfort was provisional, that security was something you built carefully and slowly and could still lose. Someone who had not grown up with a family who could catch them if they fell. I had never thought of my stability as a liability before. I had never thought of money as the thing that would make something impossible. And yet, in April, our organization had a budget crisis. Nothing catastrophic, but significant. A major grant had come through lower than expected, and there were quiet conversations happening above our heads about program cuts, about restructuring, about what the next year would look like. Celeste took it harder than anyone. She stopped eating lunch. She stayed late every night running projections, writing appeals, trying to patch the hole with sheer effort. I stayed with her. Not because anyone asked me to, because I couldn't do anything else. We were the last 2 people in the building on a Thursday in April, and it was past 9 at night. and she had just gotten off a call with a foundation contact that had not gone the way she'd hoped. And when she put the phone down, she sat there for a long moment, not saying anything, her eyes fixed on the middle distance, her shoulders carrying something I couldn't name. I got up and I made her tea. I didn't ask if she wanted it. I just made it and set it beside her keyboard and went back to my desk. She looked at the mug for a second. Then she looked at me. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "I know," I said. She held my eyes for a long moment, and in that moment something shifted between us. Not dramatically, not with any declaration, just a quiet settling, like two things finally admitting what they are to each other. Like two people who have been pretending very hard and are very tired of pretending. Then she said, "The Callaway Foundation rejected the renewal." And I said, "I know, I saw the email." And she said, "I don't know what we're going to do." And I said, "We'll figure it out." Not because I believed we'd figure it out, necessarily, but because I was talking about more than the grant, and I think she knew it, and I think she needed to hear it. The next week, I made a decision I did not tell her about. I called my mother, who had been asking for 2 years if I needed anything, if I was happy, if there was anything she could do. My mother, who meant well and loved me and understood money as a form of care, the way people do when they grew up understanding that it could disappear. I told her I was doing fine, but there was something I wanted to do. A gift to the organization, anonymous, through the family foundation, the kind of gift that doesn't have my name on it, because my name on it would complicate things. I told my mother the number. She was quiet for a second, and then she said, "Is this about the work, or is this about something else?" I told her it was about the work. She didn't push. She said she would handle it. 2 weeks later, the organization received an unrestricted gift from a family foundation they had never heard of. The budget crisis eased. The restructuring conversations stopped. Celeste spent an afternoon trying to research who had given it, running the foundation name through every database she could find. And I sat at my desk 8 feet away from her and watched her try to find me, and I said nothing. She never found out. But the secret sat in my chest like a stone. Because I had done it for her. I had done it because I could not watch her carry that weight without using what I had to ease it. And the fact that I had done it in secret meant I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. The gap between our lives was something she would feel if she knew. Not the love behind it. The gap. I had tried to give her something good, and I had given it in a way that would hide what it meant. The stone didn't get lighter. May was warm and complicated. We had started having dinner after work on Tuesdays, which hadn't been planned, which had just become what Tuesdays were. We walked to a restaurant 3 blocks from the office, and we stayed for 2 hours, and we talked about everything except the thing we weren't talking about. And I was so full of that not talking that sometimes I'd walk home alone afterward and stand in my apartment and feel the weight of all of it pressing outward from the inside. One Tuesday in May, she said, "Can I ask you something?" And I said yes with my voice very calm and everything in me bracing. She said, "Do you ever feel like you're living 2 versions of yourself? Like there's the version you are at work and the one you are when no one's watching, and the distance between them is getting longer?" I looked at her for a moment. I said, "Yes. Yeah, I do." She nodded. She looked out the window. She said, "I think I've been hiding things from myself for a long time. I think I'm getting tired of it." And I wanted to say, "Me too." And I wanted to say, "I've been hiding something from you." And I wanted to say, "I am terrified that knowing it would change what we are." I said, "I think that's what courage is. Getting tired enough of the hiding that stopping feels like relief." She turned and looked at me with an expression I could not entirely read. Something between understanding and something more particular. Something directed at me specifically. And then she looked away. "Yeah," she said. I think you're right. But before we go on, if you've made it this far, you're the kind of person who understands what it means to love someone and still be afraid that the love isn't enough. That who you are might be the very thing that makes it impossible. If this story is touching something in you, click the like button right now. It genuinely helps me keep bringing you stories like this one. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell, so YouTube tells you the next time a new story drops on this channel. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever done something for someone you loved and kept it a secret because you were afraid knowing it would change how they saw you? Tell me. I read every single one. And while you're at it, where are you watching from? I'll reply with a heart. Now, back to our story. She found out in June. Not the way I'd feared. Not in a confrontation. Not because someone told her. She found out the way you find things out when you're meticulous and you care deeply, and you have enough time on your hands during a slow conference afternoon to pull on a thread you'd been meaning to pull on for 2 months. She called me on a Wednesday at 4 p.m, and I answered, and she said my name in a way I had never heard her say it before, flat and careful, like she was holding something fragile. And she said, "Is the Weston Family Fund related to you?" I didn't say anything for 2 full seconds. 2 seconds is a long time when someone is waiting for you to lie or tell the truth. I said, "Yes." The silence on her end was very specific. Not angry, not hurt, or not only those things. Something more complicated, like a person reorganizing themselves. "It was you," she said. "It was my family's foundation," I said. "I asked them to give it. I thought—" "I know what you thought," she said. And then, "I need a day." She didn't come in on Thursday. On Friday she was there, but we were careful around each other in a way we had never been careful before, and the care was its own kind of announcement. On Friday afternoon, she asked if I could meet her after work. We walked to the same Vietnamese place on 5th Street, and we didn't order anything at first, just sat across from each other with water glasses and the menu neither of us opened. She said, "I've been thinking about why it bothers me." I said, "Tell me." She said, "It's not that you did it. It's how it felt when I found out. It felt like you've been standing outside my life with your hands in your pockets, watching me struggle with something you could solve with a phone call, and you solved it, but quietly, in a way that didn't cost you anything." I felt that land somewhere real. I said, "I know." She said, "Do you understand what it's like to not have that option? To not be able to make a call to someone and close a gap that large?" Because I grew up watching my mother work 3 jobs and still have months where everything was too tight and there was no one to call. There was no foundation. There was no cushion. There was just the work and the worry, and you keep going. I said, "I know I don't understand that. Not the way you do." She said, "Then why didn't you tell me? If it was coming from love, and I think it was coming from love, I can see that. I'm not saying it wasn't. Why did you hide it?" And that was the question I had been avoiding for 2 months. I looked at her across the table, and I felt something open up inside my chest. Not painfully, just widely. Like a door you've been leaning against, and one day someone on the other side pushes and you fall through. I said, "Because I was afraid that if you knew how much I have, and how easily I could use it, you would see the gap between us and decide it was too wide. I was afraid you would feel the difference and pull back." She was very still. "Pull back from what?" she said. I looked at her. She looked at me. And I thought, there is no more room for this kind of silence. I have filled too much of my life with this kind of silence, and I am too tired of the weight of it. I said, "From this. From us. Whatever this is." She didn't look away. She said very quietly, "You thought you'd lose me." I said, I was afraid the money was the thing that would make it impossible. She exhaled slowly through her nose. I'm not angry because you have money, she said. I'm angry because you made a decision about what I could handle without asking me. You decided for me that I needed to be protected from knowing. I sat with that. You're right, I said. I'm sorry. She picked up the water glass. Put it down without drinking. She said, The gap is real. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But people navigate gaps. What you can't navigate is hiding. I felt something shift in my chest so completely that I had to breathe through it. I don't want to hide, I said. Okay, she said. She said it like she was starting something. We stayed at that table for a long time. The restaurant filled up around us and we didn't notice. The waiter came and we ordered the same things we always ordered, and when the food arrived, we ate slowly, talking in a way we hadn't talked before. Not carefully, not around anything, just directly, like two people who have agreed to stop standing outside of things and walk in. She told me about her grandmother calling to ask if she'd eaten. I told her about my mother, who showed love through logistics, and was only slowly learning to say it directly. She told me about the period 2 years ago, when she thought about leaving the nonprofit and going somewhere that paid more, and had spent 3 months feeling like a traitor to herself. I told her about the relationship before, not with detail, just with honesty. The one that had seemed right on paper, and had left me feeling like I was always performing a version of myself that had nothing to do with who I actually was. She listened to all of this without filling the space with reassurance. That was one of her things. She let you finish. By the time we left, it was past 9 and the streets were quiet, and we walked out together and stood on the sidewalk in the October cold. We had gone back to October somehow, the whole summer compressed into this. And she looked at me with her hands tucked in her coat pockets and she said, I need to be honest about something. And I braced myself. She said, I've known for a while that whatever I feel about you doesn't fit neatly into a category I already have a name for. I looked at her. She said, I didn't want to say anything because I couldn't tell if it was going to be good for me. I have a habit of choosing things that are complicated when I could choose something simple. Is this complicated? I said. She tilted her head slightly, that flicker in her eyes. The same flicker from the break room, from the donor event, from 100 moments I had cataloged without meaning to. The gap is real, she said. I meant that. I know you did, I said. And I think the way to navigate it, she said slowly, like she was building the sentence as she went, is to stop making decisions about it in secret. On both sides. I felt a warmth move through me so completely that for a second I forgot about the cold. On both sides, I said. I've been deciding things in secret too, she said. I've been deciding what I could ask for, what I was allowed to want, based on what I thought I was supposed to need. I took one step toward her. Not because I planned to, because the distance was suddenly something I didn't want between us anymore. She didn't move back. She was very close to me now, and her breath made small clouds in the cold air. And she smelled like coffee, and her coat, and something particular that I had cataloged 1,000 times without letting myself know I was cataloging it. Can we try something different? I said. What kind of something different? She said. The kind where we stop deciding for each other, I said, and start asking. She looked at me for a long moment, that look of hers that lasted 1 beat longer than it needed to. And then she pulled one hand out of her coat pocket and held it out between us, open, patient, her. I reached out and took it. Her fingers closed around mine and I felt it, that warmth, that recognition. And I thought, this is what it feels like to stop running from the thing you've been running toward. Neither of us said anything for a while. We just stood there on the sidewalk, the city moving around us, holding on. I used to think the hardest thing about loving someone was the risk of losing them. But the hardest thing, The real hardest thing is letting them see the parts of you that you are most afraid will make them go. We are still figuring out the gap. It's real, and it shows up in small ways, and we talk about it now instead of working around it. That's the difference. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever hidden a piece of yourself from someone you loved because you were afraid it would cost you them, write "found" in the comments. That's how I'll know you made it to the end with me. And if you want to keep going, the next story is already waiting for you on the screen. A big hug, and until the next one.